At UMC, access to your health care is only a call away. Dial 74-NURSE for free, instant medical advice from experienced and trusted UMC nurses. 24 hours a day. Learn more at umchealthsystem.com.
And welcome in everyone to RedRaiders.com. I am Zach Long, that is Don Williams, and that means it's time for Don versus Twitter as we get you ready for Texas Tech and Kansas State on Saturday early in the morning at 11 a.m. at Jones AT&T Stadium. And Don, this week's group of Twitter questions, Red Raider fans are getting a little meaner here, getting a little more downtrodden with the 2 consecutive losses.
I was going to say, it's like Texas Tech lost a couple of football games or something because the tone of the questions has kind of changed this week, Zach.
A little doomsday feel to them, so let's get right in and get to the nasty ones right off the bat, Don. Let's start first with Albert Flores. They say, at AJ Don Williams, KSU played Oklahoma State, Texas, and Baylor close. They also beat West Virginia and Iowa State by wider margins than Texas Tech. What percentage chance do we, and by we they mean Texas Tech, have of not winning another game?
Ouch, Albert. I'll put the odds at 50-50, and you better get the last home game this weekend against Kansas State. It's going to be hard to outscore Baylor, and Texas is going to try to do what Texas did down there in Austin a couple of years ago, just pound you with Jonathan Gray and Malcolm Brown and Joe Bergeron. So there's not an easy game left, and as you accurately pointed out, Kansas State, I think, is kind of a sleeper 4-4 team. When you consider that they lost to Texas by 10 in Austin, they lost to Oklahoma State by only 4 in Stillwater, and then they lost to Baylor by only 10. So this is a team that with a break or two, an extra play or two here and there, could very easily be, say, 6-2, something like that. So yeah, it's going to be the chances of Texas Tech losing out, like I said, I'll put it about half and half.
And very rarely does a Bill Snyder team get worse as the season progresses. They usually improve. Staying on this trend here, and I guess this also would include a bowl game, Don, Robert Jones asks for you, will we win another game this season?
I'll say yes, Robert. Tech's going to have 4 chances, as Zach alluded to. That includes a bowl game. Last week, Cliff Kingsbury had the guys say, after the first loss, Cliff Kingsbury had his guys saying, still control our own destiny. This week, Cliff kind of has a new mantra, and that is, still haven't played our best football game. So I'm going to say, if they come up with that elusive best game at some point here in the final month, they should be able to win 1. But right now, with the state of the defense, missing 4 starters.
Absolutely.
No Dartwan Bush, no Terrence Bullitt, no Trey Porter, no J.J. Gaines. Maybe you get 1 or 2 of those guys back. Not sure. But as beaten up as that defense is right now, I don't see much more than 1 win the rest of the way.
All right, Don, let's continue on here. Looks like we have more faults and blame on the Red Raiders here from these questions, my goodness. Albert Flores says, at AJ Don Williams, with both quarterbacks having similar pass ability and mistakes, should Coach Kingsbury go with Baker Mayfield, who can at least give you more mobility?
Maybe. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other on the quarterback subject. The trouble you run into if you insert Baker Mayfield, though, is he threw as many interceptions as Davis Webb did on a per-game basis, and then he fumbled more, quite a bit more, in fact. I mean, he fumbled 4 times in the first 4 games. Red Raiders were lucky. They got back on all of them, but he had a real issue with putting the football on the ground, and that's something that this team can't afford right now. And I also think that Davis Webb sees the field better, and he's involved with more receivers.
Absolutely.
Remember that TCU game, how really overmatched Baker Mayfield looked, where he either threw it to Jason Morrow, if Jason wasn't open, he tried to run, and that was pretty much it. And remember that 3-game stretch where Eric Ward became the forgotten man and just was not getting the football. Now, at least in the last 4 games, Eric Ward is starting to get the ball more. He has, I guess the last 5 weeks, he has at least 7 catches in a game 4 times. He has a couple of 100-yard games. And if nothing else, you're seeing more of Eric Ward, at least, with Davis Webb at quarterback.
And a warning there, with quarterback mobility, that can be a great thing, but if they don't protect the football, it can be a very costly thing. And they've been getting into more of the latter lately with the mobility issues, Don. Continuing on here, Albert Flores with another one. At what point can we blame all the turnovers on coaching? Coach K is more of a player's coach, and isn't this lack of discipline? Wow.
To me, lack of discipline is what you see when you have stupid personal foul penalties.
Right.
The late hits, the losing your cool, the hot-headed stuff.
Block in the back when the play's already been past you, things like that.
Yeah. This team's not been guilty of much of that. And I have a hard time faulting Jason Morrow, too, really, for the fumbles the last couple of weeks. In the Oklahoma game, he's a big guy. He's made a lot of yards after contact this year. He's trying to run people over and get extra yardage. OU just held him up with a couple of guys, and then one guy reached in and pulled the football out. And Jace had a pretty good grip on the ball. I thought he wasn't carrying it lightly. And the one last week, I can't blame him for that one very much. If you flip me and drop me on my head, I think I'm going to fumble.
I'm dropping the ball.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think that's one that you can prepare for in practice. Let's drop everybody on our heads.
Let's flip everyone and have you come down on your most vulnerable part of your body. Yeah.
Now, to me, the biggest source of the turnovers right now, and I'll go back to it again, it's the freshman quarterbacks. You turn the ball over 22 times, and 14 of them are interceptions from Baker Mayfield and from Davis Webb. And that's something that I think this team, unfortunately, just kind of has to live with as a consequence of playing a couple of 18-year-old guys at the most prominent position.
And for anyone who is, hard on Jason Morrow for fumbling the ball, okay, go ahead. Take Jason Morrow off of this football team. They're not even bowl eligible. That's just the truth of it. He's had that big of an impact, 172 yards. And if you're going to go off on just the fumble, you're not having a very good view of what Jason Morrow actually brings to this football team.
Yeah, averaging 9 catches for 115 yards a game. Top 10 in the nation in both categories.
Continuing on here with the very macabre trend
of the day.
Yeah, the macabre trend of questions here. Albert Flores says, at AJ Don Williams, with step up in competition, isn't the defense looking like last year's? Good against lesser teams only. P.S. None left on the schedule.
Albert, I can't really argue with you on that one. And I kind of have the impression that this year's defense is better, and I still kind of feel that this year's defense is better. But I looked at the numbers comparing through 9 games last year through 9 games this year. And what you find is the numbers this year are actually higher in most categories. Rushing defense, you're giving up 32 yards a game more. Passing defense, you're giving up 45 yards a game more. Total defense, 77 yards a game more. You have improved a little bit in I guess the most important category, scoring defense. This time last year, Tech was allowing 26.3 points per game. This year, currently allowing 24.6 points a game. You have made strides in a couple of areas. One, we've talked about this quite a bit, third down defense, giving up 32% right now compared to 38% this time last year. And the sacks difference, you're pressuring the quarterback a little better. You only had 12 sacks this time last year. You have 18 sacks right now. But I think what we're seeing, though, is what Albert says pretty much. The defenses there, at least in terms of production and performance, they're about equal compared to where they were a year ago.
And a reminder, you're in the Big 12 Conference where offense is at a priority. Continuing on this theme with defense, Kumar has one here for you, Don. Do you know any adjustments being made on defense? All the remaining teams on Tech's schedule can run the football.
Well, I think they are making adjustments. The trouble that they're having is when they really focus on one thing, the opponent hits them with the other. Example, Oklahoma game early. Early on, Texas Tech was loading the box. Blake Bell hits a 76-yard touchdown pass to little Jalen Saunders, yes. And then Texas Tech is concentrating on stopping the run game against the Sooners, and Blake Bell converts 5 third downs by hitting passes between 3rd and 6 and 3rd and 10. I thought it was interesting after last Saturday's game. Mike Gundy said Texas Tech was bringing pressure, blitzing, and said, we thought as Oklahoma State coaches they didn't feel like they could stop us running the football without bringing extra people. And you saw it in one instance. You blitz Austin Stewart and it opens it up. Clint Shelf, had they not been blitzing, Austin Stewart probably would have been toward the middle, and he probably tackles Clint Shelf for a 5-yard gain. Instead, Clint Shelf with a blitz on, Clint Shelf goes for 67 yards. I think the issues to me on defense are twofold. you're small in the front 7 and you have those 4 starters out. Ideally, in the 3-4, you want a 330-pound nose guard who can move and handle 2 gaps, and you want a couple of guys flanking him who are 6'5" and 300 pounds. And of course, Tech doesn't have anybody who fits that description.
Right.
You might take it. You take it a step. Some teams take it a step further. They want the inside linebackers who are 235 pounds, and so Tech just doesn't have that. Matt Wallerstedt thought he could coach around that this season by being aggressive and quick and creative. And for 7 games, he was able to kind of, I think, mask those deficiencies. And now as the competition improves, that's being harder to accomplish.
Don, let's move on now to our last 3 questions, and I promise we may get to something a little more uplifting before these questions come to an end here. But first up, Jake has for you, at AJ Don Williams, what's the constant problem with ball security and special teams? What is Haverty, of course referring to Trey Haverty, doing to fix this problem?
As far as I know, they're probably, practices are not open, so it's hard for us to tell for sure. I think they're probably drilling a whole bunch of the same stuff over and over and just hoping they get better. But, special teams were pretty good, I thought, for about the first 5 or 6 games of the season, and then they've really sprung some leaks. You had starting with the kickoff return touchdown that you gave up against Iowa State. You had the fumbled kickoff return by Austin Stewart up at West Virginia last week against Oklahoma State. Josh Stewart returns the punt 46 yards against you, which is, you kind of expect that because Josh Stewart, that's what he does.
Right.
But then you give up the punt block. Boy, the punt block to me was the one that really stuck out because they just let a guy come through totally unblocked.
And that's 2 straight years against Oklahoma State. They have blocked punts with ease against Texas Tech.
Yeah, and Ryan Erxlaven's had 3 punts blocked in his career, all of them by Oklahoma State in the last couple of years. All I can know for sure is that they're harping on it. It's a point of emphasis, and you got to have better results. Trey Haverty says that.
And he's a highly competitive individual. I can promise you that
yeah.
He's doing something. All right, Don, here we go. Robert Powell has for you, at AJ Don Williams. Don, every week, can you give us your Tech expected bowl prediction? This is a good one and a tough one because this changes every single weekend.
Yeah. I think right now Texas Tech goes to the Holiday Bowl in San Diego, which is the slot for the 5th Big 12 team. Remember, the Holiday Bowl used to be higher, but then some of the other bowls increased their payouts, and that's what the pecking order is determined by, is how much money each bowl pays. So right now, Holiday Bowl looks like it's going to get the 5th team, and we talked about it a little bit last week, that Big 12's kind of been separated into 5 teams that are contenders and then 5 teams that are in kind of that second group, and Tech is among the 5 contenders. I think this is kind of important this week for Tech to beat Kansas State.
Absolutely.
And I think you can clinch, really, staying in that top 5 and going Holiday Bowl or better. And right now, most likely team from the Pac-12, I would say, is Arizona State. How about that? We might.
There'd be a few points scored in that football game, I have a feeling, but Texas Tech, though, they win this week and get to 8 wins. They knock themselves up a notch, and then maybe you're looking like the Buffalo Wild Wings or better. A huge game against Kansas State in terms of a bowl pecking order.
Yeah.
All right, Don, here another positive one this weekend here. Joshua Johnson has for you, at AJ Don Williams, anything from the recruits that visited this past weekend, and of course, been documented, one heck of a weekend for Texas Tech recruiting. They had in some big boys, both seniors and juniors.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Texas Tech, I think, obviously was hoping to get a big win against Oklahoma State in front of that crowd of 61,000 and hoping then that you'd get 2 or 3 commitments out of that. And it didn't happen. What you did get was 1 commitment, a young man named Jamarcus Howard from Coffeyville, Kansas Community College, whose team is already actually, their season ended actually on October 26th, but boy, his statistics were really impressive, and this is going to be an area where Tech really needs some help because Bruce Jones will be gone, Olalua Falimi and Derek Mays, your top 3 corners, the guys who have played pretty much every snap at those 2 positions, are going to be done after this season. So you get a JUCO transfer who comes in who's had a really impressive season this year, some very impressive statistics, and looks like a real playmaker in Jamarcus Howard. So there's the commitment, and then I know Landon Wright, who sits at the desk next to me, is talking to all these guys over the next few days to kind of see how they feel about Texas Tech, and you want to follow him as well on Reckham247.com, and And on Twitter at LW247.
Landon's tied in pretty tight with those kids, and a lot of them walked away with a very positive impression of Texas Tech, according to him. So it'll be interesting to see how much dividends that pays over the coming weeks, Don. Right now, though, that's going to wrap up a very feisty episode of Don versus Twitter. Thank you, though, for all the questions. Please keep those coming. Kick us a whole new set this week after the Red Raiders take on Kansas State. And stay tuned, of course, for all of our coverage, including the UMC Health System AJ Media pregame show and our topics discussion with Chris the Pirtle. But for now, that's going to wrap it up. You can find all of Don's work over at LubbockOnline.com and RedRaiders.com. Right now, though, we'll bid you farewell. That is Don Williams. I'm Zach Long, and you're on RedRaiders.com.